So today we have Alex from Shared Practices. Alex, how tall are you?
6'7".
Yeah, taller than Craig. So he's taller than Craig by a long shot.
But not better looking, though.
No, I think,
I disagree.
I find you prettier than I am. Also, I'm older. By the time you're my age, you probably won't look as good. But you look good now.
And you look you look good even in those fluorescent lights that are beaming.
Yeah, that's the most unflattering background. So I'm going to add 5 points to you.
I know. Well, I know that I can shine, in spite of, the abysmal surroundings. So
bring the energy, buddy.
Confidence.
All right, so talk to us. You've been. Let's get a little background on you, just for people who don't know you. I know you've been to a couple. Actually, I think you were at the first Bulletproof Summit, by the way, right?
Yeah, I was at the Ritz-Carlton in
the St. Regis in Atlanta. St. Regis. Yeah. All right, so tell us your best. You're obviously one of 6 in the shared practice. Why don't you tell us everyone your story?
Yeah, so my goal is to hit right down the fairway between George's extremely abrasive episode and Richard's very polished, nice episode, and be somewhere in the middle between the two extremes. But no, I joined up as a partner in SP a couple years ago, and I was a contributor, and I ran the mastermind program for SP, and then we merged all of our practices together, and we became equal 1/6 partners in not only the practice group, but also in the consulting and coaching seminar entity. So no, it's been really cool to do that, because those of us that are in the space that enjoy constantly learning and growing and improving, it's really contagious to be around those types of folks that enjoy constantly pursuing new stuff, because dentistry can be as stagnant as you want it to be, or as you allow it to be, maybe more accurately. And so by being around people that are constantly pushing the envelope and forging forth and are on the bleeding edge of innovation and possibility, it keeps it fresh.
Totally. I mean, we actually just had a pod on that with, we've got 2 other co-hosts now from time to time. Mm-hmm. We were just kind of talking about that because we're actually doing our mastermind. It's funny you mentioned you kind of led that. We're going to do our offsite. We do vacations around some of ours, and so the first trip is to Cabo. So we're all going to Cabo this weekend to kind of dig in from an immersion standpoint.
Nice.
But all what the thesis that you just described. I'm curious though. You say you merged all of your practices?
I didn't know that.
How the heck?
And then you're all 1/6 too.
Well, but how did you do that? Was it a stock, like a merger acquisitions, or was it straight merger, or was it stock, or what? Like, how did you do that? Was it based on EBITDA? I'm so curious on this.
Yeah, there was a valuation that was done by a third party that took the valuations of each entity and then reconciled that with kind of an arbitrary valuation of the coaching, consulting, seminar company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it treated those entities, in the same book of business on an EBITDA multiple, and then some of us had to buy up, some of us had to pay down to reconcile the 1/6
the balance
amounts. But in hindsight, that all of the accounting and all the number crunching was done before we knew what we would look like completely, at this stage of the game. So it was done with the best guess. And for anyone contemplating a merger, and I know you guys have talked about the good, bad, and ugly of partnerships on your podcast before. I distinctly remember at least one episode about it. You got to go in eyes wide open and look at it as almost like the divorce is imminent, and you have to look. Exactly. You have to look at it as being almost a disagreement rather than agreement. Like, have everything outlined as to what could go wrong on the front end.
Yeah, build it with the divorce in mind.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's going to end, whether till death do us part or some other circumstance. So no, we're so unified in what we want to do, and the fact that we want to be at this for a very, 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 very long time, that all of us being in our 30s, we're unified in wanting to do the teaching, the podcasting, the consulting, while at the same time, having our book of business with our practices and having, multiple ways to influence the industry.
It's so great. Really good. I think that would be so daunting to say, let's just merge these 6 practices with these 6 personalities. But it's obviously worked well for you guys. You guys have a great reputation in the industry. You're putting out quality stuff.
How long has it been, Alex?
Yeah. It's the official deal closed January 1 of 22. All of the machinations and the back end stuff were basically laid out earlier in 21, but nothing goes as quickly as you want it to go with banks and financial institutions and third parties. So it was beginning of 22, and we're doing a solely de novo model anymore. Like, we're not doing any acquisitions. Like, that space is crowded enough as it is, and that's how we.
Tell me why, Alex. Just can you put a
couple of reasons?
I don't want to cut you off, but I want to hear your philosophy and y'all's philosophy on why no more acquisitions.
Well, there's two layers to that. The first layer is, it would be disingenuous and hypocritical for us to do acquisitions when we coach clients on doing acquisitions. So a lot of our client
meaning
coaching,
a conflict, you'd have a conflict.
There'd be a conflict of interests on a superficial level, and so we don't want to dip our toe into that water and compete with our clients, because we're just not that's not above board, in my opinion. And then the second reason
very
is
virtuous of you guys. I think that's a stretch, but I think that's very virtuous
I do too,
of you.
But yeah,
it's a stretch.
The optics.
The optics are really bad. Like, you could reverse course and do it, but the optics are bad. The second reason that's very compelling is you can do a de novo for a fraction of what you can acquire practice for.
Yes, provided that you don't need cash flow.
Right. Yeah, and that's where we're at.
I know you're like, duh, Boulden. Like, of course I know that. I state this stuff because I've said the same thing on many podcasts. When you do an acquisition, typically you're buying cash flow, right? Like, that's what you're buying. Let's just be honest. That and some goodwill, right? But goodwill, cash flow. And if you want, and in that problem, sometimes in that acquisition, you have attrition of patience, drama of integrating a new team, things like that, right? You're having to polish a lot of this stuff. So this integration becomes a heavy lift, potentially. Actually, no, not even potentially. Integration is a heavy lift. Full stop. Right, Craig?
Pencils down.
Obviously in a startup, you are the architect of all the things. It's a new team. It's a new culture. It's a new this. It is much cheaper, but it obviously lacks the cash flow.
Yeah, it lacks the cash flow, but it creates so much more freedom of possibility, and you have a blank canvas, truly. And the thing with acquisitions, and you touched on it, a lot of my mentors that have grown large groups via acquisitions, there's a whole lot more pain points that arrive, even if you're just trying to do the duct tape them together and sell them approach. Like, even with that, there are
the duct tape roll up is a pain. Is not as easy as duct tape.
Smart money is smarter now, and they can sniff out a duct tape DSO, whereas maybe 10 years ago it wasn't this, or 5 years ago it wasn't this. They want a real platform.
No, there's the need for the real platform, and one of the things that we are very open with on our podcast and with all of our clients is, there's going to be a reckoning at some point with all of that, the dumb money that you alluded to. There's going to be a reckoning with that. So anyone who's caught with their pants down, it's going to be rough for them. And I think the market is getting so segmented where you either have really good, savvy operators on one end of the spectrum, or you have people that are saying, hey, you know what? I'm just going to batten down the hatches and have one really solid location. And the people that are caught in that nebulous middle ground area where maybe they're aspiring to go from 2 to 5 locations, but they're thin on management or they're thin on processes. Like, that's where it's going to be no man's land pretty quickly. Right. So I think it's a great idea to err on one side of that gulf or the other.
I feel like since he's been such an advocate of Bulletproof, some of this is either, I can't tell, but I love the way he's sounding. But
you're so smart. You must have learned this from us.
Hopefully we've had some influence in you.
Yeah, it's just osmosis. Like, it goes from a higher concentration of knowledge to lower concentration, and that's where it goes.
Yeah. I think I'd be on the bottom of that, unfortunately.
I was just thinking, like, to be able, obviously you guys had a nice vision that you all agreed to. I want to hear about your coordination in the beginning, right? Making sure that, like, okay, here we are dating, now we're getting engaged, now we're getting married. Who defined this is the vision we should go? Do you guys want to jump on, or was it a collaborative effort?
It was incremental. It was George Herrera and I went to a seminar, and we had this, trademark epiphany that so many people with big ideas have. And the
you went to a seminar?
Mm-hmm.
So a seminar just that, not about that, obviously, but just
no,
you guys
we just were
spending time
together.
together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We were together at a seminar and we started talking,
Mm-hmm.
and we thought of the idea of, okay, we know the industry is getting more consolidated. We know that there's strength in numbers to be had if it's done well, if it's not the duct tape approach. And, just how quickly the industry is changing, there's going to be so many economies of scale at the larger, level, that soon we're not going to be able to compete with a bunch of like in our own sandbox type of approaches. And so we started talking about it. Then we enrolled Richard and Matt Garino, the other two legacy founders of SP. And then we eventually added on, Matt Ford and Austin Davis through some recruiting pitches. And all told, it happened in a couple of months. And
Wow.
we enlisted some third-party advisors to help us along the path to do the valuations and such. But we agreed in principle pretty quickly. And another point on partnership in broad strokes, I think that can be helpful to the audience is if ever you try to do something that's not equal parts, even if it's like 51-49 for like a controlling interest or anything that's majority minority, even if it's well designed and well intentioned, be careful of those hurt feelings and the likelihood of any kind of issues that spawn out from that. Like the ripple effects of having the majority minority, they can be good, and sometimes the ripple effects are justified by the benefits. But go in eyes wide open whenever you're proposing something that doesn't have the maximum amount of equanimity.
I mean,
can you
okay,
unpack
so
that a little
basically,
bit for me?
yeah. So are you saying that someone having a super majority, majority is not beneficial, right?
Right. So we started off having an unequal distribution of equity between the six of us. Like it was parceled out according to like a weird way of doing it, that we eventually realized, this is too complicated. Just 1/6 across the board.
So what's your belief system about different positions of equity on a cap table? What's your fear? What's your thought? Let me understand that.
There's two ways of looking at that. One way to look at it is, what are you bringing to the table initially? And then the other way of looking at it is, what do you purport to be able to offer as we grow and scale? Are you bringing something in on the front end that's irreplaceable, or are you offering something 6 months or a year from now that you can't get from elsewhere? Because one of the maxims of partnership is only partner with someone that offers something that you can't yourself offer. Because like equity, Peter, you're probably familiar with Naval Ravikant, right? Like the Twitter guy. He does the big tweet storms.
Yeah,
so one of his
equity is the most expensive things.
Yeah, well, equity is a scarce resource. I mean,
right.
I have a very abundant view of the world, but equity is scarce. Valuable equity is scarce. So be sure that whoever you're partnering with brings something to the table in exchange for that equity. So that was our mindset, to answer your question, Craig, is that...
Well, that's not answering my question though, because I was speaking to Naval will say himself a small piece of something, owning a small piece, and Naval hasn't been a super majority shareholder in many of the things he's entered with. So I'm just trying to unpack because I'm a minority partner in several things that it brings not only opportunity at the get, but long-term overall experience and expertise. I'm just speaking to, Peter has minority non-share voting shareholding stock partners as well. I would hitch my wagon to a person who has opportunity and smarts all day long and take a minority piece on that. I'm just trying to understand what I understand you don't have the same level of contribution and voting rights, but I've done it successfully many times, and I just was trying to understand
to dumb it down, like to have that many cooks, chefs in the kitchen, right? I think progress gets hindered because it's like, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? And so that's an efficiency issue. And so I think Craig is saying, look,
I've wanted a super majority shareholder in many things.
Yeah, and in my models, I am the majority, but I declared the vision early, and then everyone said, yeah, I like that. Let's do that. And so maybe that's a unique situation, different than y'all's, because you guys came together as a collaboration, new entity, and so it's quite different.
I think the difference too is if you're the operator versus if you're just purely a minority shareholder with an active or a passive role in the business, because all of us are operators. Like all 6 of us actively operate in the business. So if you're a super majority, then probably you're an operator in some form or fashion. Whereas in a lot of configurations, you can be a minority shareholder and not have an operations type role as a central cog in the day to day. And not saying that's necessary, but I know that like we're 1/6, equally operational in nature between our different roles, and that's how we
and
keep.
You really are. So Craig, they went about it because I know Austin and George pretty well now, but you guys do kind of, it's a divide and conquer. Like this is my lane, and I'm going to master and you guys just know that like I've got this like business development aspect or this marketing or whatever it is, and so it truly is a divide and conquer, not a duplication. And so I so agree with what you're saying. Do not offer a partnership until someone can bring something to the table that you really can't do, or don't want to, or don't have the bandwidth to do anymore.
Yeah, I was just speaking to a personal bias. Like if I was in that similar situation, I enjoy a controlling not for me personally, but I would be more inclined to step into a relationship where we had 5 of us were all equal, and then there's one that's like leading the charge. I work well with that as long as I respect the values and decision making of the leader, and
that's the point.
They take
that's
my
the
input into it, and they consider my input. But
Yeah,
I've wanted that. I've been in other situations like with my buddy Michael in real estate. I'm like, I need you to be the majority shareholder. If you're not, I will not invest in this deal.
Yeah, I think that comes into play when you have someone who's head and shoulders either senior in years or experience or knowledge or an ability. But when you come in as a multitude of equals, then I don't know, the democratic approach tends to work, at least in our case. And I don't know how replicable or scalable that is. I just know that like in our weird little partnership, it tends to work because we have such like disparate skill sets. And like for each of us, we realize that if we wanted to do things on our own and blaze our own trails, then we'd be invariably wearing hats that we don't want to wear for the rest of our careers.
And you guys have, it's new. It's the first chapter, and God willing, it goes well. So I was just speaking. You had a clear bias about that, and I had a clear counterpoint to it. So I just wanted to flesh it out.
What's what's your plan? What's y'all's plan? Like, what's the, I hate to say a 5-year goal, but let's just say like if you had the magic wand, where do you see your SP practice group evolving?
Well, we see getting to triple-digit locations. That's where we want to get to in the next 5 years.
100 locations plus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We
Awesome.
we intend to make a splash, and that's at the same time as continuing to grow our consulting coaching side because we see dentistry as being a very complicated market. Yeah, there's two sides of it.
Well, no, I'm saying that one helps feed the other. I mean, because you guys are voices in the industry, people say, I like what they're saying. I'd like to join them if this is what they're doing. So you guys have a unique arbitrage, not from financial arbitrage, but you have an attention arbitrage.
And we used
they
to
also
see
get to know you. I mean, your podcast listeners understand who you are. They've it's not it's an eyes wide open opportunity. They know every personality.
Yeah, and we used to see there being more synergy than maybe there actually is, because originally we were all about only practice ownership or bust on the podcast. And we've since gotten a lot more nuanced in our angle, knowing that there's plenty of great outcomes for dentists, regardless of if you do full-blown like solo hang a shingle practice ownership versus partnering with a group that can offer equity at the single site. And so there's shades of gray, there's sophistication there, but we want to offer things at every level, depending on if you want to be super duper clinical and not worry about management, or if you're like, hey, I want to do like the manifest destiny, do my own path. There's room for everybody.
I agree. So 100 locations, geographically agnostic.
Yeah, and that's the cool part about living in 2022 is that you can be more geographically agnostic than you ever could be before. You can have remote operations. You can scale different departments without having to be in one geographical radius. And so there's ways to do it based on the goals of the people that you interact with, the interest levels of people that might want to partner with you, in various sites. And what we've seen too is I saw this in Arkansas when I was dipping my toe in the multi-practice waters, and others have seen it in other comparable markets, is that the cannibalism is a real thing. Like, especially if you're doing any type of a niche practice, and I'm sure you saw this, Peter, with your locations, where how big is the optimal radius so that a niched out type of practice does not auto cannibalize a neighboring practice 20, 30 miles away. Like, what's the sweet spot? And you probably had to learn that lesson, the hard way. And we've done that with some split testing.
Yes and no. I've actually, I'd love that you're bringing this up, because I was going to actually do a whole pod on this, Greg, and I'm not going to spend a whole pod worth of time on it. But yes, cannibalization is a real thing for your practice, especially when you're doing multi, especially when you're in a metro area. So what I did, Alex, I've learned the hard way by making emotional decisions or gut decisions, because I've quote unquote lived here my whole life. I'll know what to do. So I got burned by that. So I started making myself do data-driven decisions instead. So I have so there's an opportunity in my area. I have a building that's coming available in a great location, although it's within 3 to 4 miles of another location. Great roadside visibility. It's a standalone. It's an MRI clinic that's going that's not renewing their lease. I didn't want to get romantic about the fact that, oh gosh, I have a building and I'd love to put a dental practice in. So I wanted to justify it by data. So what I did is I exported all of I hired a cartographer who then used a service online, which I found out you can use. I forget the service. Exported it all into a CSV file of all 20,000 or 22,000 people that have ever been in my practice. And from that, Alex, it created a weather map of the density of where people are from. And so that was a really cool exercise to do, because luckily it confirmed my suspicion, but it was a nice thing to do in terms of like seeing your ideal market. So like if you do this, even if you're not trying to expand, which is why I was trying to do the podcast on it, even if you're not trying to expand, it would be nice to say, wow, this area, we are really clobbering it in. What have we done here? Either step and repeat another area, or wow, look at this opportunity over here that for some reason we are not tapping this community. And so data is just your best friend when you just are kind of your back's up against the wall. But so much, I love how you started that, Alex, with cannibalization is a real thing, and it should be front and center when you are doing multiples. Because 3 miles, I'll finish the last thing I'm saying. 3 miles might be okay in a metro area, but like I have a couple of rural practices too. And so, 20 miles, 25 miles in that would be cannibalistic in that area. So it really, you got to run the data. So Alex, go. Sorry.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it would be negligent to not do that anymore. Like with the ubiquity of data and the ubiquity of being able to check and recheck and double check and triple check.
But
nowadays,
so many people don't, though, Alex. They just run demographic reports on said new location without running the cannibalist.
We conflate, too much importance on our guts and our instincts, because we feel like we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and, we know best because we know the area. That's what gets you, is like I thought that about Arkansas, and then I bought this like fledgling location right after all the COVID stuff, and had a plan to resuscitate it. And it ended up taking way longer and being way more capital intensive and requiring way more patience than I ever thought possible. But it was a really good learning opportunity. And to do it in your backyard prior to doing anything remotely, I think is a great prerequisite for anyone who's thinking about doing multi-practice, because if there is a fire to put out, you'd rather it be 20 minutes away than 2 states away.
Totally. Yeah. The proximity, the proximity to fight the fire is definitely a real thing. I actually was looking at a practice in Dothan, Alabama, which did not pull through on. And after driving that a couple of times in my diligence, I was like, I don't have a pilot's license. There's not really a good airport.
But it's also management, leadership, infrastructure too. I mean, it's not necessarily that you have to drive, but like one of your team leads.
Sure, someone will have to
drive 5 hours. It's untenable. You can't do it.
Well, back to our original thing we were saying with Alex is that especially I didn't mind it once I got everything integrated, but the first 3 to 6 months was going to be a heavy lift, and I didn't have the bandwidth nor the desire, quite honestly, to travel 4.5 hours on a good day. To an out of the state practice. So
you don't want to be an Alabama man, Peter? Come on.
No, I absolutely want to be an Alabama man. I think honestly that areas where you're in, I think Alabama, I think Mississippi, I think all the areas that are kind of,
you've always liked that. Peter
I
loves the
love
Southeast.
a rural market. I love a rural market. I love overlooked areas. Everyone focuses on metro, but I like non-metro areas. I like strong secondary communities in smaller states. So
Yeah, if you can retain doctors, that's the way to go. I mean,
100%.
There's still
100%.
so much opportunity here in Arkansas that's untapped, and it's crazy. Like you find a state that does not have a dental school like Arkansas. There's just so much opportunity that the saturation level's not there.
So let's talk about that. You brought it up. Excuse me. Retention. What are you guys doing? What has been the consensus among the 6 of you guys as you scale to 100? DSO's biggest impediments right now, let's call it private equity DSOs. The biggest impediment to their success is the retention of the doctors, the retention of the team. What is your problem solution to that as you go to triple-digit locations?
For us, it's an earned equity model where you hit certain practice level benchmarks, certain profitability metrics, certain top line revenue numbers, and then that equates to a certain percentage of earned equity.
At
Real
that
equity
location,
or phantom
not the
equity
whole
or-
co. Well, hold on.
Right.
At
So
that
in the
location
practice, practice
location,
level.
sorry. Okay. And then Craig's saying, is it real equity or is it profit sharing, phantom share?
RSU type of thing.
We originally were doing an RSU type approach, and
I know who consulted you on that. The RSU one.
It was a heavy lift, to borrow your
God.
nomenclature. Yeah. So we pivoted away from that, and we're doing more of what we're calling synthetic equity, which is a variant on.
That doesn't sound nice to me, by the way. You might want to call it something else. It's like, here's synthetic meat. I'm like, no thanks, I'm good.
Yeah, it's soy-based equity. Is what
Yeah,
it is.
exactly. Non-caloric, non-appreciating. It's great.
Yeah, Bill Gates approved.
Impossible equity.
Yeah.
Right. Use beet juice for blood.
Yeah, but it equates to a percentage of the profit sharing essentially at the single site.
At the
But in the
location
event
level.
of a sale, like so for capital appreciation, does it have capital
Yeah,
appreciation?
there are considerations for if there's a sale, because there is an allotment that the doctor earns, and then in the event of a sale, that's valued at a certain EBITDA multiple.
So it's
you guys
basically
are-
like
Sorry, Craig.
sorry, it's basically a golden handcuffs. It's a vesting schedule that continues to vest over time.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone it's a dissuasion from leaving, I guess, right?
Right, and it's creating a solid outcome at the end of it too, and that's ultimately
everybody wins. Everybody wins in that scenario, and I talk about that all the time, like sustainable relationships. You can't have a three-legged stool that you all of a sudden pull one leg out.
Well, and that's what got us to pivot away from the RSU, was that we didn't ultimately feel great about the outcomes that were being created.
What does
and
that
we
even
felt
stand
like
for, by the way, guys?
Restricted stock unit.
Yeah.
Restricted stock unit. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And so we
Sorry,
pivoted
Alex.
away from that because we want to create more tangible, measurable, impactful outcomes at the practice level too. Because if we want this to be a long-term, endeavor, then it has to be a win-win-win across the board. And with our newer approach to that, that's what it's going to be.
Love it. I love it. That's I like to see it. So obviously you 6 are at holdco level, and then you have individuals around. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Craig, anything else?
No, I've been a very good guest listener today. I think you
have.
were,
You have been awfully quiet.
Yeah,
Usually
I'm just like
squawks
listening
a lot on the pod.
No, I don't know. I'm listening. There's nothing that's like really piquing my curiosity.
You're not
I'll
interested
be more
in-
interesting on part 2, Craig.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just might let you guys handle part 2.
How's your outlook, Alex? How's your outlook for?
Craig doesn't like being the second tallest guy on the recording.
He does.
No,
not.
I really,
He's
I came with a lot of energy, but as soon as I found out you were 6'7", I remembered meeting you. All my superpower just like left my body. I feel like
He
emasculated.
stole all his testosterone.
Yeah, whatever's left, actually, Peter.
What's on y'all's horizon? I know obviously the steady growth. But is there anything that you've seen from we talk a lot about, I don't know if you listen to our podcast,
Yeah, I do.
but we have a lot of we talk about the economy and macro stuff and geopolitical stuff just because dentistry doesn't exist in just its own little petri dish.
Correct.
So What is concerning to you right now? Is interest rates bothering you? Because obviously you guys are going to be debt funded, I'm guessing, unless you're trying to, yes, you're going to be debt funded to get to 100 locations. I'm just kind of throwing out some fodder. Like what's giving you guys angst right now as owners?
The main thing is we're wanting to make sure that we're positioned to capture as broad of a swath of the market we can, because for a lot of people, everything looks like a nail if all you have is a hammer. So we're trying to have different price points to be more recession resistant, because I don't think you can really recession proof anything, but you can be more recession resistant. And so like for our denture and implant offices, if all on fours aren't an option, be able to do overdentures or be able to do immediates and then convert those to overdentures later on. So having a menu of options that suits the macro economy, I think is a way to go. And that can be extrapolated down to the GP office too, because a lot of people that, and you've alluded to this, Peter, before, about the people that are cosmetic only, in certain market cycles, that doesn't play well. You can go belly up if all you can do is, no prep veneers all day long. But if you're able to do surgery or be able to offer a more broad suite of services when the economy tanks, then you're going to be fine. And the people that only want to drill and fill or do some other niched out service might not fare as well.
I completely
it
agree.
never really made sense for me. Like the dental offices that are hyper niched, it just, unfortunately, patients don't really know what they need. So even like, some of the uber successful models, like the all on four direct to consumer models, like a Clear Choice or whatever, there's a lot of people that think, that I've met in my 20 whatever years of practicing dentistry, that come in and say like, I need dentures. I'm like, you need like a filling and a deep cleaning and some whitening. So I think that, and that's an exaggeration to a comment, that I think patients don't really understand what they need. And when we're hyper niched, I think when we have the last 10 years that we've had, everybody can do well, hyper niche, general. But I think that there's another position that dental offices, you should be a fit for a broad segment of the population, because people will come and you shouldn't have to refer them out. So imagine all the people that walk into Clear Choice type centers. And I know now they're affiliated with Aspen, so it's a little bit of a more easy integration. But in the past, like people, just needed crowns. And, when you have implants as one of your only tools in the tool chest, it just doesn't make sense for me and dentistry to have that hyper niched focus, even in a good time, never mind in a recession.
Yeah, I mean, you have the optics of seeing that from a longevity perspective and knowing that you saw the pain. I mean, I lived through that, obviously, the pain of being hyper niched and then going through 2008 and being like, wow.
Yeah, we weren't hyper niched, then, and we expanded through 2008 and 9, like 75% growth. But I did other things. I did an acquisition during that and merged them in.
Oh, okay.
So there's opportunities like that. But I just wonder, what are your positions? Take the recession out of it, and let's talk about hyper niched dental concepts. Like, what's the reason why? Maybe I'll ask you, Alex. What's the reason why you guys do that? What's the reason why you have a dental implant location?
I'm not sure he does, right?
Well, he was saying for a dental implant locations, he said something like that.
Yeah, so most of our new locations are going to be of a denture and implant type of slant. Like that's going to be the designation. And so the benefit there is, it's from a marketing standpoint, it's easy to get in front of those types of patients, because, looking at the overall demographics, we have an aging population, a lot of people that have gone decades without consistent dental care. And so there's getting to be a larger and larger pool of patients that are candidates, for that type of treatment. So from that standpoint, if you have a large enough target market, it can work. But a lot of the niches that people declare, like the sub niches within dentistry, some of those aren't viable, at scale or in a lot of different markets. But there's a reason why you mentioned Clear Choice, Craig. I mean, there's a reason why the Clear Choices of the world, chose that niche as well, because there's a market for it.
No, of course. So what's your strategy then? Because I imagine you're not building Clear Choice sized storefronts. What's your strategy then? Are you doing like a hub and spoke model where you put your denture and implant, you put GP around it? Or are you just saying, we're focused on this, top of the pyramid, implant, denture, blah, 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 and the rest of it, we don't really care where it goes? I'm just curious what your position is on it.
Yeah, we've definitely toyed with the hub and spoke because we've seen case studies of that being successful in certain markets. But for us, in our analysis, the key facet there is in certain markets. And so what you laid out with your option B there is more of what we're going to be doing, is just like a standalone office that we are able to form some synergistic partnerships with that are more traditional GP providers.
But
so
those
that we can
might not be in your ownership. They may just be synergistic partnerships
exactly
outside.
Yeah, it'll just be reciprocal relationships to refer back and forth, and we've been building those out. Because GP, I mean, GP is such a grab bag, like just pure GP. You see everything from one extreme of being super Medicaid PPO heavy to being super fee for service. And it's really hard to standardize the GP model in our experience.
Just my thought process is going like to consume the CAC, the consumer acquisition cost, to get like a clear choice type patient through the door, or your patient through the door. It's so high that like, why not have like, we do implants plus general dentistry, so that when the person that comes in and you spent the blank dollars to acquire them, you can be like, okay, we can do your Invisalign here too. I don't know.
The
whole life cycle. It's just, and again, obviously biased because we're all coming from very different ends of dentistry. Like my practice is very different from Peter's and yours and all that. But like, that's what alarm goes off in my head, because I know what clear choice's CAC is.
Well, and two, you lose the benefit. Like one of the reasons that dentistry is the darling of private equity, in my opinion, is because we are like a subscription service almost, right? We have these recurring recares. So if you start getting hyper niche, I know cosmetic dentistry. Like I don't even have hygiene in my practice. I'm like, oh my God, you're going to have some pain here soon. And it's, I know we've had 15 years of a bull market, but there's going to be some pain with this one, bud. And I don't say that obviously, but when you have the specialization, right, the dentures and implant, maybe do you have a model in there that's building for a recare scenario?
We've looked at it for sure. And if you want to go on the way back machine, there was a really interesting old shared practices episode where George and Austin duked it out over that very topic about the benefits of having like a stable floor of recare to bolster up the new patient flow versus just marketing super heavily for new patients, irrespective of whatever retention you may be able to have. And, me philosophically, I have a larger, not like Craig level, but like larger GP office where retention is a very key component of it. So I hear you loud and clear. I just know that with the model that we've built out with what we're seeing so far, it's working well enough, knock on wood, without having any kind of a hygiene component or a retention component or offering a broader suite of like GP services. I think that's something down the road, like in certain markets, that could do well, where you have
we're also, sorry to cut you, Alex, but we're also products of the economic times in which we're formed.
Sure.
Blockbuster Video, like, I don't mean to draw the Blockbuster conversation, because that's a broad generalization and potentially offensive to what I'm about to say. What I'm saying is that like during these last 10 years, all models have worked really, really well. And if you are a believer that the future will be less robust, it would be far more efficient to have that recurring. That's why we are the darlings, like Peter said. Like my buddies who are plastic surgeons do Botox at a loss, not because they like doing that, but they have no other recurring way to visit their patients. So dentistry is beautiful in that patients show up even when they're not needing work. And a lot of those patients have been doing SRPs and blah, 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 and their teeth ultimately fail. And they do need that all-in-4, or they don't. But it's like, to be hyper, I find it troubling. And again, I only speak from my own bias, but to go into this new phase of economy with saying, you know what, we're just going to kind of buy our way into the patients. And without that, being able to capitalize on all life cycles of dentistry is just troubling for me.
Well, the cool
but
thing
you're
about
not asking my opinion either. So,
well, yeah, but the cool thing about it though is that even though that would require more infrastructure and more human capital, you could always flip that switch down the road if necessary. Like if we go like DEFCON 4 and stuff goes crazy, like that's always something that you could flip on. Or
contingency, yes.
Yeah, it's always an option.
Yeah. Alex, any questions for us? We've been rambling.
No, I mean, I
turned into Shark Tank, I think, is what it really was.
No, that's okay. It's fun because I think that's how we get better. And to bring it back to full circle to the mastermind approach, I mean, that's what any good mastermind does is you pressure test each other's ideas, and you get like a panel, and you force each other to talk about the why and the underlying premise, and you poke holes in it. So I'm
going to
thankful.
put Peter on the spot for a second. Peter, what do you feel? What's your opinion on this? What do you think?
On the mastermind pressure test?
No, not on the mastermind, on the dental implant model. Like, what are your thoughts?
I actually,
what would you do?
I love their model. Because I think they're looking at underserved areas where you can, where they can deliver, right? Like the 60s, like Peter Diamandis, right? It's like they're going to digitize and bring modern tech to areas that typically don't get that. Rural areas don't get that. And so I think there's an underserved demand, and people who are wanting and willing and needing the services. So I really like that.
Would you
model.
add on a GP component to it? I'm not, because I probably asked the wrong question, because I like the model too, especially when you look at the
I think I would build out.
I was saying,
I think I would build out, but I don't think the model is predicated on. I don't think its success is predicated on the general model in this instance. I think there's a short runway for it, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, but I would probably build in some general ops just in case, and then if the model was gangbusters, then you could obviously infill.
You flip them back to that.
Yeah.
I think what I'm really focused on is saying no to general dentistry. That just pains me. If X dollars are coming in the door saying like, oh, I just need this, or I need a cleaning.
Well,
like, oh, we don't do that here.
I also think though, Craig, that I see some power in, right? Like, you don't want to be the Swiss Army knife all the time either. So the branding gets confusing when you're like, we're dentures and implants and general dentistry and Invisalign, and
we rotate your tires.
It gets harder. So I love this is our flag. We are gonna, we are the flag bearers of X, and we're gonna do it, and reserve the right to pivot. And all it takes is a different chair, a different plan. It doesn't take different stuff.
Coming full circle though, Peter, I just think that the average patient is not sophisticated enough to know what they need. And Clear Choice has done a really good job of educating the consumer. Like, hey, they do these amazing patient stories and all this stuff. And it's a heavy lift though. It's a really heavy lift. So there is some, benefit that you get in markets that Clear Choice is putting their dollars in, but you have to drive 2 hours to get to one. I mean, that's huge. But I just worry
Craig,
that patients don't know.
In the areas that he's describing, the CPM, right? The cost per 1,000 people's eyeballs, right? CPM, cost per 1,000. I know you guys know this, is categorically different than the one that may be in a metro areas that Clear Choice is focused on.
Sure.
Right. So it's a difference of a factor of 20, by the way.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So I know you're saying it's a heavy lift, but it's actually not, because it's a non-crowded market where there's lots of attention being willing to be bought for pennies on the dollar.
And there's so much attention to be had, even in those markets where Clear Choice has gone into already. Yep. I mean, it's a newer niche of dentistry, and it's one that is not as crowded as the GP. Because what I've seen in a lot of the research is it can be really crowded to jostle for elbow room in the GP space. And so even within the GP space, there's still some subspecialization that you almost have to do, whether it's appealing to some demographic or some identity of the patient or something that sets you apart in the GP realm, unless you're going to like these secondary, tertiary markets already. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways to do this successfully, and a lot of different paths to success. And that's the cool thing about the whole industry that we're in, is that there's no one way to do it.
Yeah, and we all come from our own unique backgrounds of like what works. So I'm trying to insert like my hygiene brain. Like, I'm so thankful for hygiene.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm just trying to insert that in there. But no, God.
I mean, it's your own conformational bias.
Of course it is, and theirs too.
Right, and I'm in our partnership. Like, I'm the consummate GP guy, so like I'm the naysayer that has to ask those questions, and I'm the one that had to be brought to bear when I was like, well, what about hygiene? What about having the stable 28 to 32% of revenue coming from hygiene year after year? Set your watch by it. And, there's enough benefits of making the bold declaration and niching out. We feel that it's worth it.
Yeah. I was looking at your models of this plus that, not this instead of that, but that's all. But no, it's awesome.
Alex, enjoyed it, buddy. We'll do a part 2
likewise.
for sure.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for the time, and thank you guys for what you do for the industry. Thank you for
Likewise, buddy. You're
Thank
doing
you. Yeah,
the same thing.
likewise.
So thanks for
That was
making it better.
kind. I don't think
Very
anyone's ever
kind.
said that on a public podcast to us.
Well,
Craig.
Alex,
you're the first.
you are now the kindest
You are the
guest we've
kindest
ever had.
guest
It was
we've
very
ever
nice.
had.
You didn't go down the fairway. You went down the left kind side. It was very nice.
Yeah, you're more in the opposite side of George, right? If you said George was, would you say abrasive?
I didn't think it was an abrasive pod. I liked it.
I loved that.
I liked
podcast,
it
was
too.
by the
great.
way.
Yeah.
That was a great episode. You guys handled it really well. The gloves stayed on for the most part. It was really good.
No, George.
Yeah, but
is a
it
good
wasn't.
guy. You're
it
all
wasn't
good
like
guys.
no one went jugular, right? It was just
No.
like going at it, and people just get so uncomfortable with like any kind of conflict at all, right? But like especially
how we
on
get better,
podcasts,
though.
Have you noticed this on podcasts? It's always like anything the guest says, it's like, yeah, that's great, as opposed to being like, that's dog shit. Like, why would
Yeah.
you say that?
Yeah, but that's how
Like,
we
did that
are.
just the other day.
Peter and I talked, like the way we spoke to George was exactly how Peter and I would speak to each other. Exactly.
Well, that's a
So if
sign of
anything-
respect. Instead of trying to play nice and
Yeah.
placate the guest. I mean, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, no one wants
Yeah.
that. Everybody wants everybody to be real.
I know George loved it, so he
He did.
loves that. He loves the
He
pushing
thrives
up.
in that.
He
Yeah.
thrives on that.
Let's do it again.
All right,
Let's
buddy.
go again on
Well, let's good to get on and connect. And yeah, man, we are cheering you guys on from however we can. So I love this. I love where you're headed, bud.
And good luck
Yeah.
with your mastermind event. That sounds like a
This weekend. It's
badass
gonna
thing.
be-
Like all of
it's
our
gonna be
mastermind people are
badass.
going to be like, "What the hell? Why aren't we going to Mexico?"
Why aren't we in Cabo? What's going on?
Exactly. So yeah, so
All right,
thanks for
guys.
that.